So I'm here in the cab of this S770 combine, and I want to talk about active yield and what can we do to get the highest performance and the highest accuracy out of that active yield system. Now, this system does make things a lot easier while it's constantly taking samples and ensuring good calibrations and high accuracy, but there are things we can do to help it along and get that calibration dialed in much quicker and easier. So first things first, if we go under menu in our combine, calibrations and procedures, there's two important calibrations that should be done before we start focusing on yield. And that is our mass flow vibration calibration. That one should be done with the header for that crop. So if we're about to go into soybeans, we want to do a good yield calibration, make sure our draper or our auger header is calibrated with this mass flow vibration. That'll take any shake or movement of the machine and zero that out so that the yield sensor is not recording any of that. We have a separate video on that. The other one would be our moisture sensor calibration. Now this, whether it's a newer machine, like this one, there's not much to do. It's gonna look at that on its own. If you've got a little bit older machine, sometimes it's called the moisture sensor temperature calibration, and that will compare ambient temperature to what the moisture sensor reads. So as long as you dial that in, that'll be about the same as this. We always want to make sure our moisture is accurate and correct before we worry too much about yield, if we want to go for the highest accuracy. So not only doing these calibrations, but once we get in the field, making sure any moisture offsets are set for that crop. So if we need to apply a correction factor in here, we can do that. If we're a point high or a point low, adjusting that number so that the moisture sensor is highly accurate. But next, if we want to start with our active yield system, I like going through the grain handling menu, but if we get to this active yield page, you'll see our master is on, and it's going to start gathering samples. So as we harvest, it's not as particular on the flow rate, the header width, those sorts of things. What it's going to do is from about 20% full in the grain tank to about 50% full in the grain tank, it's going to weigh the grain coming in with those load cells in the grain tank. It'll compare what those load cells read to the mass flow plate on the clean grain elevator. And as long as the combine's maintaining a relatively constant ground speed, it's on relatively level ground, it will accept that sample. And the more we harvest, the higher quality this will go up. Now, one thing to just double check is still have your checks and balances with this system. John Deere says that do 5 loads and then compare to either a truckload or a grain cart with an external scale system. And if we need to apply a correction, we can do that through the information and settings button in the active yield page. But as long as we're within 4% accuracy versus what the external scales show in those first 5 loads, active yield will do the rest and it'll dial it in closer and closer from there. But sometimes it's good to just help that system along, apply that correction with those first 5 loads and get the machine as accurate as possible. So that's the active yield system. Whether you're setting your yield monitor manually or with active yield, make sure you're doing your mass flow vibration calibration first. Make sure you're setting your moisture and doing any calibrations for that system also prior to yield. Then we can go in and do an accurate yield calibration. The last option would be going into John Deere Operations Center post-harvest and doing a post-harvest calibration. That'll take all your seasonal weights coming across the scales from truck tickets or whatever else, and it will correct all your yield maps to the true scale tickets. We'll have a separate video on that.